What's going on, everyone? Nick from Comic Culture here. We have another episode of Creator Conversations. Today we have Mark Russell joining us, award winner, writer of Traveling to Mars. We're here to celebrate this amazing, amazing book, but I'm not alone. I actually have two co-hosts, count them two, with us tonight. I'm going to bring them on right now, starting with Stu, Dr. Doom's fan club. Man, Stu, how's it going? How excited are you?
Station. Oh man, I'm so excited to be here. Speak with Mark about this amazing book. Uh, just finished the reread today. Obviously, getting ready for this. Cried again rereading it. So such a moving piece of art. I can't wait to hear Mark speak on it and
Oh,
pick his
absolutely,
brain.
man. So excited. But I needed two co-hosts to help me out with this whole thing. So I'm going to bring on my next one. We have Eric, 9 panel grid. Eric, man, what's going on?
Good evening, gentlemen. So happy to be here, man. So pumped for this. Same thing with Stu, man. I've been rereading this all day and just, yeah, I'm so excited.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's not waste any more time. Let's bring this guy up. So, Eisner Award winner. Most recent works includes Batman Dark Age, which I've been absolutely loving so far. We have a couple issues out right now. Superman Space Age, of course, not all robots. So many books, including Traveling to Mars. Help me welcome Mr. Mark Russell to the stage. Mark, how you doing, man? Thanks so much for coming on.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, we are such big fans. We are so excited to have you on here. If you cannot tell already, a little chatter backstage. Everyone's got a little nerves right now. We're really excited to have you on here. So just thank you so much again. And if this whole thing crashes and burns, it was Stu's idea to begin with. So if this thing goes south quick, we can
Amen.
blame him and it'll all be
Absolutely,
good.
I'll wear it.
But yeah,
As
thanks for
long
coming
as
in
I'm
again.
not
So
left holding the bag, that's all I care about.
no, no,
No,
no. We protect
I
our
got
guests.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, that's fine.
yeah.
So, if anybody hasn't read this series yet, this is a celebration of Traveling to Mars. We absolutely love this series. We've been talking about it in the back chat for 15, 16, 17 months now. This is such an incredible story. It just concluded the other month back in April, right? So, we're so excited to have this conversation with you and kind of break it down a little bit, see where you're coming from when you're writing this story. But for those who haven't seen this issue or read this series yet, can you break it down for us? Like, who are the characters? What's the whole idea behind the story here?
Yeah, it's about the first manned mission to Mars, and the person they send to Mars isn't some great astronaut or somebody who deserved to go because they scored really high on some sort of test or anything. The first person to go to Mars is sent because he's terminally ill. So they know it's going to be very cost effective to send him because they don't have to bring him back. And it really is the story of his sort of like journey, his one-way mission to Mars, knowing he's not coming back, and him going through his regrets and things he wished he'd done differently during his life on Earth. And he's kind of I think he sees himself as a loser in his own life because he was like assistant manager at a pet store since he basically was a teenager and never really moved beyond that. But he is joined on this mission by two Mars rovers that have artificial intelligence, so they're semi-sentient beings, and to them he's a god because he's the only human being they've ever met, so surely he must have all the answers, and they worship him. So he goes from this position of being this sort of terminally ill assistant manager at a pet store to being kind of the most famous man on earth and being this god figure to these two robots on his one-way mission to Mars. And so it's a very big transition for Roy's life. But that's essentially the story. It's a story
Yeah.
of regret and also a story of how
Mhm.
we tend to be let down by the things we
Yeah.
revere.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So much emotion is inside the story, and it's peppered with feelings of regret and remorse and just lessons learned, right? So I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about that um, here in the upcoming stuff. So we're going to have a couple questions for you, just about like the creative process and the story in general, right? So we're going to be throwing some
Yeah.
stuff at you. Stu, do you want to start us off? What do you got? What do you think?
Yeah, Mark, just touching on Leopold and Albert, I just loved the journey that those two robots take. And one of my favorite passages was from issue 5 when, he was talking about I think it's Albert's PTSD after he went out to fix the craft, and how he didn't want to be reprogrammed or whatever. And I think you had the line, besides it's the damage that makes us interesting. I just love how we take this journey not only with Roy but with Leopold and Albert, and also all the other rovers when we get to Mars in the second half of the journey. At what point in the creative process were did you choose to like really have them be you know, those secondary characters and expand their roles? And did you always want to do that like starting out, or was that something that kind of developed more along the
Mm.
way? Or I was just curious how that developed when you were creating it.
Yeah, I knew I always wanted to have them as his companions, and I knew also that I wanted them to sort of grow as people as they're on board the ship, because this is essentially how we grow as people. Our experiences change us. We are both scarred and sort of edified by the magic that we experience in life. And so I wanted them to go through a similar journey. The ways in which they grew and changed really I kind of made up as I went along. It just kind of I kind of just went with what felt naturally to me. I'm When I write, it's like putting together IKEA furniture. It's like, yes, I have a blueprint. I know exactly how to do this. But then as I'm putting it together, it's like, no, this doesn't work. I'm going to just go with what I think is right. And
Yeah,
so that was kind of
perfect.
my approach to Leopold and Albert. It was like, oh, I have an idea of exactly what I'm going to do with them. But as you are actually, tightening the Glubelforg or whatever, necessity overrides your plans.
Yeah, I love those little details, like them making snow cones for him, and them kind of adapting their laughter to the sound of chickens clucking. I thought that was just
Oh yeah.
brilliant. I love those little nuances and details along the way. When that second part of the story
That's
with
a
all the rovers on Mars, was that also something you knew you wanted to do, you know, in advance?
Yeah, that was also part of the game plan from the very beginning. What was a little different about that, what changed as I went, is it ended up being much longer than I thought it was going to be. Because I just found there was just so much to say, and I found like the big moments of like the revelation and about what these rovers have been through and their own sort of backstories really deserved more attention than I had originally planned to give it, which is why the series is 11 issues long. Because originally I was just planning for 10, but I realized there's so much that needs to happen on Mars, or these moments need to
Uh,
be given respect, that I asked for like an 11th issue. And one of the advantages of writing a story like this and working with a publisher like Ablaze is they just said, sure, if you need 11 issues, that's fine. So I feel like the book was made
That's
probably
great.
as good as it could be by the fact that we were allowed to go to 11 issues.
Yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
totally have to agree with that too. Like one of the things that I pull out of my pocket, one of the stories I tell all the time, and I think you conveyed that so beautifully, is kind of what you just said. Some of the things in my life, it's like the best things in my life have come from the absolute worst circumstances that maybe I've been through. So that was conveyed so beautifully through these two robots and through Roy himself. I had heard you in a couple other interviews. You had kind of mentioned like where books like Second Coming was actually initially a pitch for a completely different book. I'm kind of curious, in the same vein of kind of like what you were just talking about here. Was this book? What was the genesis of this book? Like, what was the initial pitch, and how did that change and grow into what we actually got with the 11 issues?
Yeah, I had originally written this out as sort of a short story, about a 20-page short story. So I knew that I wanted to tell this
mm,
short story in a longer format and have it be accompanied with art. And so I was, but I didn't really know how much longer. And so the story itself is more or less the same basic idea, but it just grew to the point where there's characters that didn't exist in the short story. There's just sort of subplots. There's memories that didn't exist. I think it's like a popcorn kernel. It's like I knew it wasn't completely
It's
different,
amazing.
but it's a completely different form than what
mhm.
I'd started out with.
Yeah, that's interesting to see how you can change just like a simple idea from like a short story into a comic, because comics are so versatile. You know what I mean? You can really do whatever you want to do with it. So it's really
It
cool that you
is.
were able to
Yeah.
extend that and add more to it and just still make such an impactful story. So that's really interesting too.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of what I found as I was, writing the scripts for this, is like how sort of incomplete the original story was, and about how it was good that I was turning it into
That's
a whole
awesome.
book. And also the artwork itself changes the story, because you start thinking more in terms of like visual things. And so much of it, less of the book was was spent
Yeah.
inside Roy's head, and so much of it was spent like sort of actually on the ship or on Mars because of the
Mhm.
different format.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, and the art was really interesting too. I think we're gonna get into a little bit of that here in a second too. But I'm wondering about the additive effects of all the different past experiences that Roy has. So like every single issue, we seem to uncover a little bit more about his backstory. We learn a little bit more about his family and his his jobs and just all the lessons learned and everything that he had. So when you're looking at these 10 issues, which turn into 11 issues, how much of that is figured out early on? And how much of that are you evolving as you're writing these issues? And, are you saying to yourself, okay, I need three or four more issues, I need three or four more stories, something like that? Like, how much do you have planned out early on and how much are you developing as you go?
Well, the things I had from the very beginning were the background of him being in the heavy metal band Viking Funeral. That was something from the very beginning, and also the story of Leroy
Mm.
Brown, the catfish. That was something in fact, that was the whole reason why his hometown was Eufaula,
Yep.
Alabama, because I just put his hometown there, so he had a reason to know about Leroy Brown, the catfish, who is a real figure, by the way. Leroy Brown actually existed, but everything else about his like sort of life,
I was wondering about that.
about his life in Alabama, and also his
Yeah.
wife was a character in the original story, but pretty much everything involving her and her backstory and their story together
Mm.
at the pet store and their marriage and everything, all of that was pretty much invented just for the book.
Wow, that's crazy too. Yeah. So it I guess it is fun to see how things can evolve and what you need like out of necessity, right? If you need to go. And I like what you said about having to extend it. You just had this need to extend it an extra issue just to kind of fit some extra cool things in that develops later in the story. So you always wonder that as a reader. You don't exactly know like how much goes into all this, right? And so you really appreciate it. I've never put pen to paper before, but I can imagine that you're going to be popping up with all kinds of crazy ideas as you're writing, right? You might go in with certain expectations, but over time you might adapt and improvise, right?
Oh
So,
yeah. Well, writing, I think, especially in my process, it's mostly rewriting.
yeah.
I mean, people think about writing as like, oh, well, you just sit down and type out a story, but that's not really what it is. I mean, you might sit down and type out a story, but then that's just the first step. You have to go back and think about how the characters are reacting to the story. You go back and you make the lines punchier and better, and then you subplots occur to you, and you throw them in, and then you have to choose which things to take out. So it's more like solving a Rubik's cube than it is just sort of like sitting down and typing for an hour.
Yeah, just trying to unravel that ball of twine sometimes, right? Yeah. That makes sense.
So, Mark, you had kind of mentioned kind of, some of the reasoning that you had the smaller details for Roy take place, and you had talked about getting in his head. But I got to be honest, I'm kind of curious more so about what was on his head. The mythology of Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of like looms large in my family. There is, it's an unverifiable story, but they say my parents maybe had tickets to the last concert that Stevie Ray Vaughan ever performed. So I gotta ask, was this had a red
Oh
herring
wow.
to something happening with the ship that Roy was on, or was this just like a happy coincidence that had me on the edge of my seat the entire stories?
Yeah, this is one of the details from the original short story I wrote that carried over, just because I thought it would be really cool if he had something that had no business being in space or on Mars, or if there was some artifact on Mars that was like the most random thing you could imagine, just sort of being there. I think I was kind of inspired by the idea that the the uh, the only existence or the only human being that aliens would find any evidence of having existed on the moon would be Richard Nixon, because his signature's the only sort of signature on the moon. So I thought it would be really cool if there was some other, if somebody completely random had some evidence of their existence on Mars. I don't know how I came up with that. I don't remember how I came up with Stevie Ray Vaughan specifically in the hat. I think it was because when I was in college, I worked at a video store, and one of the videos
Hmm.
we had was the Stevie Ray Vaughan concert series, and he's like wearing this very vainglorious, sort of almost like Three Musketeers like
Yeah,
hat
yeah.
on the cover, and it just I would walk by it, and it would just sort of stick in my head. It's like, now that's a fashion choice. So I thought maybe it'd be cool to give Roy something like that that sort of completely uh, counteracts the humbleness of his origins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna walk through the rest of my days just pretending that the Stevie Ray Vaughan hat is in fact on Mars because it's just so much more heartening to know that it's there, maybe rather than the Richard Nixon stuff. So
Well, technically, it's still the essence of it is still there, right?
Yeah. No, if I
the
was an
essence, yeah,
alien, I'd
exactly.
much rather find that. I'd much rather find,
Yeah.
Yeah, than a
yeah,
bottle, than a pile of
yeah.
plastic. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, Mark, I had a question. I was thinking back 8 days before issue one dropped on Instagram. You wrote that you feel like by the time it's finished, that this may be the best thing you've ever written. I absolutely agree with that statement. And I was just wondering if you remember what specifically prompted you to say that, and if there was a point in the creative process, just in general, where you felt like things were heading that way or really clicking. But yeah, I just remember that post, just always going through this series, and it always struck me. So I was wondering if there was one specific moment that made you say that.
Well, I've always felt good about the series from the moment I started writing it, but the moment where I started really thinking about this in terms of the canon of my other projects and where it stood and how good I felt about it really was after they landed on Mars. And I was like coming down the finish line. I thought, wow, this really is like, I think, coming together better than anything I can remember. It's like
Hmm.
I've never had an experience like this. I think where it's all coming together at the right time, and I know what I'm doing, and I know how it's ending, and I feel very strongly also about the stuff that's come before. So it was, the kind of writing experience you don't get very often as a writer, but when you do, it's like it kind of it gives you confidence that you can rely on for years because you at least know that this can happen, that you can create something like this
Absolutely.
occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? Did you feel it was in that same vein? Because it really felt like you're taking your time here. Do you felt like it was more of a more personal project than other things you've written up to this point, just in terms of Roy and his, or just maybe the story in general? Did it feel like you were more personally invested in it emotionally, or?
Well, I think there's that, and there's a lot of sort of semi autobiographical details, which also made me feel more personally connected to it. And also, I think a lot of it was just that I had the time to tell the story I wanted, and the fact that it was basically a man alone, albeit with two robots, aboard a spaceship for 6 months, made it able to slow the story down and made it be about the things I wanted to be about, which are his regrets and his own sort of personal feelings about his life on Earth, because I didn't feel the pressure to have a fight scene every 20 pages or whatever.
That's true. I had a quick question about one of the vehicles you use for like delivering Roy's history, right? Roy's past, right? So the Easy Beef Corporation, like they would eventually start giving him these timed packages, and they would be full of like little nostalgic bits, right, from his past, and it would inevitably spark some kind of memory, which we would relive as the reader, and then it would have some kind of a lessons learned, which you would pull forward into the situation that he's in at that moment, and those kind of compile throughout the issues. So like specifically talking about like that vehicle of delivery for that message, like how did you come up with that package delivery system, and like did it just come to you as you're writing as a way of introducing the reader to these past experiences, or is it something you like found online while looking up like how to stay sane if you're traveling through space forever, like where did that come from?
No, it wasn't really the product of research. In the story I originally wrote, it was a way that they would keep him sort of like mentally invested in the trip and not just and also sort of mentally healthy because he has something to look forward to, which is I think is what keeps most of us mentally healthy. The idea that we're
Mhm.
moving forward and we have things to look forward to, even if they're very small. But it turned out to be a really good writing prompt because all of the things he gets in the boxes and the way they play out in the story, all of that I created from scratch as I was writing this book.
Mhm.
So it would every time I needed to prompt a memory to something back on Earth, I could tie it
Yeah.
to something he'd got in these sort of memory boxes, and also it gave him like a little treasure of keepsakes, and also allowed me to finally get a communication to him from his ex-wife. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because these boxes
And that's
existed.
fine. And it helps settle a debate. When we were talking about his mental health in general, there's a doctor from the Beef Corporation that seems like he's, I don't know, he's more like empathetic towards Roy, right? In his mission, perhaps. In fact, I think in the very, I think it was issue like 8 or 9, something like that, when everybody's celebrating that he landed, he's the only one with his head down. He actually has some kind of he's in remorse, it sounds like, right? It looked like he was actually kind of sad and everything. So, was that character really on Roy's side? Was he on the Beef Corporation side? Like, it feels like he was on both. He was riding that line, but I thought that was a really interesting touch, at least from the art perspective too, because it really conveyed that he was his friend and he was invested in him.
Yeah, I feel like he turns into Roy's friend. I feel like he
Mm,
started out as an employee of the company, but he really becomes like a personal friend of Roy's. And the reason for that character was that I needed somebody who's maybe a little more educated and a little had a little more background in science and stuff to talk about these things with Roy about like who in history has probably the greatest claim to immortality, or to talk about what would happen on Mars
mm.
if you decide to take your helmet off. I needed somebody who was like a character who had a reasonable expectation of knowing these things for him to talk to. And it was just helpful to have another human
Yeah,
character in the story.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was like the voice of kind of like the voice of reason, and like kind of help Roy work through a lot of things like that. I love that. I love
mm,
that, like when he dissuades him from taking his helmet off on Mars though, and he breaks that down to him. That was a great scene.
yeah.
Have we asked about did I miss have we asked about Roberto Melli and how it came to?
Roberto Melli was brought in by the Arancia Studios, who oversaw the project. They sort of oversaw all the production and the publisher and whatnot. So they brought in Roberto Melli. They actually showed me like a bunch of portfolios of different artists in Italy, since it's an Italian company, and I felt like they had a lot of really good artists to show me, but Roberto's I thought was far and away the best portfolio. And I think the thing that set him apart from the others was that he really did a great job of conveying subtle emotion. And I thought this is going to be so important for this series because so much of it is Roy like alone writing in his journal, or Roy, looking at the rovers, or Roy talking on the screen. That I needed somebody who's going to be able to sort of nail these like small moments of sadness and regret, or thinking that he should say something but
Absolutely.
choosing not to. And those are very hard emotions to convey. I mean, in comic books, most of the emotions you see are like, anger or hatred, or, you know, wild joy. Uh, Comics, there's far more comic artists who can nail the really big emotions than the ones who can hit the sort of subtle emotions, the minor keys. And that this series is mostly about those minor emotions, or the emotions that you are keeping within yourself, but you can't help but show.
A quick follow up to that one though. How upset or excited was he when when he realized he had to draw pet stores, emptiness of space, riots in the street, small town floods, all these different variations of scenery, every type of scenery you can conceive. He had a wide range of things he had to complete. So, what was that conversation like when you were talking to him?
I think he was grateful for it. I think because I think that what would have been boring would be if he was just drawing the same sort of background in a tiny
Yeah,
spaceship over and over. So the fact that like some of it does take place on Earth, and there's this, there's scenes in a church, there's scenes in a storm, there's scenes in the house. I thought that made it more interesting than it would have been if it had just been one guy in his tiny tin can of a spaceship for the entire 11 issues.
and I know another follow up real quick to that one is I know, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of the story that takes place inside of Roy's head, right? There's a lot of internal monologue or narration that's happening there. And there's a lot of scenes of him just navigating the spaceship in general, right? He's laying down, he's walking, he's eating, he's doing stuff while this narration is happening. Do you have a lot of notes to give on those kinds of things? Like, I know a lot of people, they like to write their scripts and they have thumbnails and they have the different panels, what they expect, and they let the artist kind of do what they want to do what they do best, right? Interpret the script and showcase the character correctly. A lot of notes on that, or is he taking that narrative and just kind of doing whatever he wants to do to make it still interesting?
Yeah, I had some notes. In fact, one of the things I did for this book is I drew a diagram of the Aramon, the spaceship, and where everything is on board the ship, so we got a sense of the spatial dimensions,
Oh,
and
really?
also where things laid in relationship to each other and what all the different parts of the
Mm.
spaceship were there for. And also, I sent him crude, my albeit my own sort of crude drawings of what I envisioned Roy and the rovers looking like. So yeah, there were some notes. I didn't go so far as doing thumbnails for every issue, or but I did send him probably about 8 or 9
Sure.
drawings of like things I thought were really important to the story, and I thought
Mm.
this is the way it's playing in my head. And he did a good job of sort of interpreting it, like not doing exactly what I'd sent him, but making it close enough that he got the spirit of it right.
Hey, kind of pinging off of something that Nick was saying about the nature of this book being so narration driven, we're inside of Roy's head the entire time. Part of what makes you, in my opinion, such a great writer is the fact that, like, you hear a lot about it that you're, kind of conveyed as a satirist, if you will. But I think that you do a great job of balancing, a lot of humor with a lot of really true, like, true emotion, right? Because there's been plenty of times, like I was telling these guys today as I flipped through every single issue here, like I was smiling from ear to ear, but on my initial read through, I got to be honest, I was crying like a baby through multiple issues here. So how do you find that balance of striking like these true human emotions with some of the humor that you bring to these books?
Well, I never really try to find a balance. What I do is I just try to write about the thing I feel like I have the most important thing I have to say about a subject, or the thing I feel like is most genuine or authentic for me to talk about. And sometimes it just happens to be funny, and sometimes it happens to not be funny. And so I just sort of let the emotional impact or like fall where it lay. But I really just want to write about the things I feel like are the most meaningful things to me, and the things I operate under the assumption that I'm not that unique. So if I find something really meaningful or really sort of impactful, I'm just guessing the reader will too. And I don't care if it's funny or if it's sad or whatnot. I just want to write something that meant something to me.
No, and that makes so much sense too. Yeah, because I think authentic is the perfect word for it. Because like Roy, albeit you take away the spaceship portion of his story, and I feel like that's a guy I definitely went to high school with. I know exactly that personality type. He may as well be a real person to me. Yeah, and I'm sorry, Stu. I totally stepped on you. Go for it, man.
No, you're good, man. Just no, just picking up on the themes in your work, Mark, like existentialism and finding meaning in life. Despite knowing it all end one day. We see it in countless characters and stories from you. I just can you speak on that a little more and what causes that theme to kind of be so pervasive in your work and how, if at all, it's shaped your own personal life and decision making. We just see it in so much of your work, and I love it because we all have that feeling that the world is burning, and how can we? What are we supposed to do? How can we make the best of a rough situation right now? So, yeah, I was just wondering if you could expound a little bit more on that.
Yeah, it feels like the one thing that we can all sort of agree on, whether you're left or right, or whether you're young or old, or religious or atheist or whatnot, the one thing everyone seems to be sort of agreed upon is that the world is coming to an end. The difference is like what we should do about it. And so I feel like in a lot of ways, this is what has attracted me as a writer. Is like, well, how do you deal with the sense that this is all coming to an end, or deal with the emotion of your own futility in the face of existential crisis? And I think it's helped me personally. I think in a lot of ways the writing acts as a form of therapy to feel, well, I'm not powerless. I'm powerless to change what you do. I'm powerless to change what someone else does, but I'm not powerless over my own reactions. I'm not powerless in the sense that I don't have my own life and I can't find great meaning in how I live, even knowing that it's all going to probably evaporate into some sort of radioactive dust at some point. It doesn't make it any less meaningful to me. And I make a point in the book, I think through the words
Right.
of Candace, that there are actually more synaptic connections possible within the human brain than there are combinations of atoms in the universe. So really, what
Mm,
happens inside your head, it's bigger than the actual universe. That is more grand and more epic than
mhm,
what actually happens in the universe. So it really, the question really shouldn't be, well, what does it matter if it's not changing the world, or if it's not like going to last after the destruction of this civilization or this planet? The question really should be reversed: is, well, what does the universe mean? What does the civilization mean if it's not like changing the things inside my head? It should be judged the other way around. And really, the magic that matters is the magic that happens inside the human brain.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely.
yeah, I know yeah, there's so many impactful quotes inside the series, and like pride being a grave in which man usually buries himself. Just like so many things that pop up in the series, and we were talking about it backstage a little bit and in the back chats. It's like every single issue seems to have just these profound statements, and I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying there. But like, how many times, in all seriously, in all seriousness, how many times did you pat yourself on the back when you come up with some of these amazing quotes? Like, I can't imagine like you can put a book together at this point of just one liners, just banger after banger. You know what I mean? So like I heard you talk before about, writing, what was that? I think it was writing comedies harder than writing drama. So like what, how do you come up with all these one liners, man? It's just absolutely brilliant and amazing that you can do it. So there's no question there. Props to you. How about that?
Yeah, I think that if I have a talent as a writer, if I have a talent as a writer, it's putting things. I would summarize. I would summarize my talent as brevity, and I think that's what a lot of it comes from. It's both humor, and I think these sort of pithy statements are both sort of the product of brevity. It's like if you can put this thing that you've been thinking about all day into one line, or into 6 words, then you've probably got something.
Wow, that's a great point.
Yeah.
There's so many times where you
Absolutely.
can reflect on something or have certain emotion, have certain feeling or an experience that we just can't put to words. And it seems like some people are poets do this all the time, right? They can put things to words that other people can't. And yeah, just reading these issues, it felt like poetry.
Are you doing this on demand, or does some of these come to you and you write them down and save them for later, or like?
No, I think some of them existed originally in
Yep.
the story, in the short story, but they all are sort of bespoke to this book. It's not like I was sitting around with this great line that I wanted to throw in there. It's more like the book and the subjects inspired the lines. Which a lot of it was just like, oh, this is a paragraph, and I can't have a word balloon with the paragraph. What words can I
That's
get rid
awesome.
of, or is there a better way to put this? And slowly, a good line emerges. A lot of it happens in the shower, where I'll be taking a shower, and I'll get these eureka moments, like, oh, well, of course.
I was about to say I just have this mental image of Mark being out to like brunch with his friends, and they're like, "Jesus Christ, put that notebook down! I'm sick of you writing down these bangers as you're telling them to us as we eat our eggs. Like, I don't want to
Oh,
see this anymore."
I become much I've become so much more socially acceptable since the smartphone age started. Because I used to literally just bring a notebook around with me places, and now I can
Mhm.
sort of furtively go on my phone and nobody thinks anything of it. They think I'm responding to an urgent text or something, where it's just me like, oh no,
Yeah.
I got this sort of moment of inspiration. I'm writing like something for Batman to say to the Penguin.
Yeah, you're creating bangers and everybody else is checking their
Yeah.
Instagram or something like that.
That's
Like that's the
awesome.
difference right there. So
Are you doing voice? Are you doing like voice memos and like in the voice of Batman when you're recording these, or are you like writing it down, or how
mm,
does that go?
Oh God, no. Oh, No, I think it's best for everyone that I don't try that. I think it's yeah, no, I just,
Okay.
I have, like, a little, notebook, like, just like a little Word file where I'll just you don't even need to be online for it. I could just sit there and
Sure.
type something really quickly. Uh, but yeah, everyone who knows me and that I hang out with regularly just sort of knows that occasionally I'll duck out and do this. But nobody thinks they do because everyone does that now. Everyone's writing
Mhm.
texts or is like checking their social media all the time. So I just blend right in. It
Right.
used to make me
Yeah.
stand out.
Yeah.
Now I'm just a schlub.
Yeah.
I'm just
Absolutely.
That actually brings up something I've been thinking about with especially with this story too. And you had kind of mentioned we're talking about like being out with friends and everything, but a lot of this book revolves around the nature of isolation. What was this maybe was this book written during maybe the height of the COVID lockdown? Because it sure feels like it. And I know that sometimes like these really difficult circumstances that we go through in life are sometimes like the most fruitful when it comes to creativity. So was this kind of born out of that?
it came after the COVID shutdown, but the way I write or the way I feel like I write is that it's not during sort of emotional crisis that I'm really good at writing about it. It's afterwards. Uh, it's really hard for me to write about what I'm going through at the time because I'm still
Yeah.
processing it. I'm just out of sheer self-defense, sort of pretending I'm not experiencing it or thinking about other things. But then afterwards, like a year
Yeah.
afterwards, when I'm really sort of figuring out what happened to me or how I've changed, that's when I'm able to sort of write about it. So yeah, the timing does kind of work out for that, where it's like this is probably a lot of it is me processing the sense of isolation and the sense of doom I felt. I remember during COVID, during the shutdown in September, there was a week here where we had wildfires really close to our where I live. So much so that the sky was like this
Mm.
apocalyptic orange and we had the by far
Mm.
the worst air quality of any city in the world. Like I think our index was in the 500s, and then the second worst was
Wow.
Mumbai, India, and it was like 270. And it was during the COVID shutdown, and it just felt like the world's just ending. It was kind of hard to give a shit about anything because I just felt like, well, this is it. You know, it's like, well, probably
Yeah.
I'll be dead in a year or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and and really, that's not the best time to be writing. It is probably the best time to be sort of processing these emotions for when you
Yeah.
write about them later.
Yeah, and I live in a similar area too. I experienced that. It was crazy.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's part of your life was spent like thinking and feeling and surviving, and then the other part of your life is spent sort of talking about it. And that's what writing is for me. It's like the period of talking about what I've already been through.
Yeah, and COVID was such a weird time too because and with the wildfires too and that change of scenery, like not only did you hear that the world was ending on the news every single day, but you saw essentially the heavens falling down. You know what I mean? Like it might as well
Yeah.
have been, right? Like everything is
Yes.
burning. So who knows what is being implanted, right, on everyone's brain when they're experiencing all these things? And like you said, maybe it's not.
Yeah, I just felt like yeah, I got to one point where I just felt like I don't really even care if it does end. It just feels like
It was.
relentless to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. It did. We all felt. I feel like super lost at that. And I had a 12-year-old daughter, and it's like them being out of school and watching them kind of like how long it took for them to kind of readapt to society and things like that. It was it put a gap. It put a big toll on all of us, and I think all of us are just now maybe starting to get back into a rhythm and really trying to
Yeah, for sure.
find our way again. But I think it waylaid a lot of us.
Had a quick question for you about variant covers because this series had some amazing B covers, all homages to like classic comic book covers. And this is a question and a moment of show off.
You
So I
just want to
apologize.
show off your art.
I
Yeah,
just
I
want to
don't
show
know.
this off.
Act, I'm like,
Yeah, we
So I
know.
got with Brent McKee, and yeah, I actually
Oh
have the
wow.
original art for issue number 8, cover B, that Star Wars homage. So I don't know if you've seen this or if you've had any like input on what these variant covers look like, who's involved in that, and do you have any original art from your own series? Because I got a piece right here that
Yeah, no, I'm a little perturbed because I have zero. Yeah, I have
Oh
zero original art from the series.
way
what
to go, Nick.
man?
I need to talk to Roberto
Yeah,
because I don't have any of the art. I don't have any of the covers or anything.
Well, then I gotta ask the follow-up question though. Did you have any input on the fact that I'm fairly confident you're a character in the book?
I had no impact on that. I had no. I did. It wasn't my decision. In fact, when you see me in a comic book, it's almost never my decision. People put me in there to be nice, but I'm always sort of weirded out by it a little bit. The one time I actually wrote myself into the comic book was for One Star Squadron with Steve Lieber because it was based upon a convention experience I'd actually had. Um, but for the most part, uh, artists will do me a they'll say, oh well, I'll make Mark so happy by putting him in the comic, but I don't really want to be there. To be honest, I wish I wasn't in any of them. Frankly.
Clearly, I'm a narcissist. I want to be in all of them, and I want all the original pages too. So,
Well, part of it is that it takes me out, and the other part is I'm like, do I really look like that?
Mark, I'm always fascinated by what a creator's typical day looks like. When do you like? What is your normal schedule? Do you wake up and write early in the morning? Are you a nighttime writer? Do you write with music on? How does it? How does a typical day for you look?
Yeah, I try to build my writing day around when my brain works best. So I usually have a writing session in the morning, and then I'll take a break in the middle of the day to go to the gym or take a walk or and take a shower and stuff, like a 2 to 3 hour break in the middle of the day to let my brain sort of recover from writing in the morning. And then in the afternoon I'll do another writing session. And if I have a deadline creeping up on me or I've got a lot to do, then maybe even a third writing session in the evening. But generally I try to keep it to two writing sessions, about 3 hours each, with a break in the middle, and with like exercise and sort of things that will sort of cleanse the palate, as it were, between my various writing sessions. I do listen to music too. Generally music without words. I'll listen to like jazz or
Yeah, that sounds
instrumental
healthy.
music. Uh, unless I'm doing something that I don't have to really think about the words, like say like a lettering pass or something,
Mm,
then I'll listen to whatever.
I've heard that from a lot of writers about listening to music with no words.
yeah, I can kind
yeah.
of confuse you or something like yeah, yep. Well, I have one final question about traveling to Mars real quick, and it's more about what do you think? What's the best anecdote? What's your favorite or the one that you think is the most impactful that we experienced through Roy's past? Like what's the anecdote that you think that really kind of stood out to you and or pulls on the heartstrings the most?
For me, I think probably my favorite issue to write, and probably also my favorite issue to read, is the
Hmm.
one where Roy gets the letter from his ex-wife
Yep.
towards the end. I think it's issue
Yeah.
9.
And she just kind of gives him the freedom to live and
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been portrayed a certain way through the whole series, and like it's like a good guy in some cases, but he learns those lessons and he flips when he can, right? But like his relationship with his wife and the tragedy that they have, right? Like they having children and they can't do it, right? And Roy kind of pushed her in that direction, and seeing how she eventually evolved and how she moved on and was like in the service of others, right? And like she was able to, I don't know, put that down, right? It's again, it's like poetry back to Roy. It's like the push he needed to make the determination he needed to make, which led him on the path to like free these robots, right? At the end. It was just like it was really inspiring, and like Stu said, that was a moment definitely when the tears started coming. I was just like,
Yeah, I
oh
think
man.
it made him aspire to be a better person. But yeah, I feel like that was sort of the
yeah,
emotional climax of the
absolutely.
story.
Candace was like a beautiful genie in a bottle, right? That like it was like just this looming thing in the story over and over, and I was so excited when she was there because it was just so worthwhile.
Yep.
Yeah, I love you how you gave her that second life of being a midwife and still, being around like, new life and delivering babies. I thought that was such a beautiful kind of epilogue to give her character. And finding out that in the letter was awesome.
Well, I wanted to dovetail with
Yep.
what Roy was going through on Mars. But yeah, I wanted it to be sort
Yeah.
of like this is what inspires Roy to realize that he can give life as well.
I had another question about just process in general. Like there was not there was not a single issue that felt wasted, right? There was always a great opportunity to keep building on this character and keep pushing things forward. And you spoke a little bit about getting that 11th issue. Are there any other examples or any other series that you've been putting together that you kind of have that extra bit that you want to tell, that you have to like convince that publisher, like, hey, I have a really cool thing I want to do. I want to push this further a little bit. Like, are there any other examples of that that you can think of?
Yeah, I feel like if I could have another 20 pages for Batman Dark Age, I would definitely take them because I'm having to. I'm finishing up the series now, and I'm having to make some very hard
Mm.
decisions about what to leave out. So if I could get an extra 20 pages on that, I feel like it would be optimal. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would be nice.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a consequence of going from 3 oversized to what, 6 regular sized or something like that. I think that's the dynamic between Superman and Batman, your books right now.
Yeah, it's definitely easier to write 3 80-page books, I think, than the 6 40 pages because you don't have to orchestrate endings. But um, but I can understand why they went to that model as well because it's cheaper for people to take a shot on, and it does sort of keep you sort of focused on these climaxes.
We are running towards the hour mark at the moment, but we definitely wanted to talk a little bit about your upcoming projects as well. So I thought we'd transition a little bit to there. Eric or Stu, do you have any other process questions or any questions about Traveling to Mars before we dip into that?
No, just to put an end cap on it, though, I just love the fact that the book itself was about immortality because I got to say that this book is definitely going to live like on our bookshelves, in our hearts here forever and ever.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you
yeah,
for this
we
book,
just
I
man. It
hope
was
appreciate the
so.
story
amazing.
so much. So, thank
It
you.
really was.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. A collected edition hopefully will be coming out later this year. I think I saw it last time I checked on it. It was August 6th, something like that.
There's also going to be I think there's one in August, and then there's also going to be a Kickstarter for a like a deluxe hardback edition. So keep your eyes open
Ooh.
for that.
Let's go.
Oh, you're killing me.
Oh,
Yeah, we get that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love buying
I
a
cannot
book
wait for
3
that.
times, like that's
Oh, who doesn't?
thank you for
It's the best.
yeah,
This,
for
this is
sure.
worth
Yeah,
it.
yeah, for sure. Thanks for doing that. Yeah, I know you have a lot of projects coming up soon, so I want to make sure we're able to plug some of those right there. I have a few on my list, but can you go over what we should expect to see from you in the stores soon?
Yeah, we've got like I mentioned, Batman Dark Age. There's also recently just came out Deadbox, the series I did with Vault that had about a 2-year hiatus between issues. That finally is out in collected form. There's also, as you probably heard announced, I'm writing X Factor as part of the new X-Men universe. So issue 1 of that drops in August as well. And yeah, so all those things are coming out, and I'd appreciate people checking them out.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep. Again, we have Traveling to Mars coming out later this year in trade format, so make sure to get that deluxe hardcover coming to Kickstarter. I believe we have Batman Dark Ages, like you just mentioned, X Factor. A lot of people are excited for X Factor. We cannot wait to see what you're going to do with that team, and really looking forward to that. Of course, My Bad has been great, and so I can't wait to see some more from that as well, and Death Ratioed as well. So yeah, we're really excited for everything you've been putting out, and just so happy that you were able to join us here tonight, man.
Yeah, thank you for making the time,
Yes,
Mark. We appreciate you.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.